From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the African and Middle Eastern Division of the Library of Congress. I'm Mary Jane Deeb, Chief of the Division, and I'm delighted to see you all. This is a very special program with His Excellency Girma Birru, the Ambassador of Ethiopia in Washington, D.C., who will be talking about the growth and transformation plan of Ethiopia 2011-2015. And we're very much looking forward to hearing him. But as most of you already know, our division is made up of three sections: the African, the Near Eastern, and the Hebraic sections. We're responsible for materials from 78 different countries throughout the Near East, Central Asia, the Caucasus, as well as from the entire continent of Africa, North and Sub-Sahara. We're very active in acquiring and developing collections, briefing visitors coming from countries from all over the world, and organizing programs, symposia, and workshops. My division colleagues and I reach out to scholars and experts who have researched and done work on our countries of responsibility to share with us their insights and their findings so that all of us attending and participating in the programs leave enriched with new information and a better understanding of the cultures and societies whose publications we collect. Today's talk is a case in point. The ambassador has such a broad experience and so much to share with us that it is indeed a pleasure and an honor to have him talk to us. In a few minutes, Fentahun Tirune, the Ethiopian specialist, will introduce him and share with you some of the extraordinary highlights of the ambassador's life. But first, Dr. Peggy Perlstein, the head of the Hebraic section, which Fentahun Tirune is very much part of, and she will say a few words. Thank you.
I, too, want to express our sentiments that we're very honored that you're here today, Ambassador Birru. We're looking forward to hearing your talk, and we really appreciate your taking time out from your busy schedule to come here to the Library of Congress. Before Fentahun Tirune introduces today's guest, let me mention that this event is being videotaped for subsequent broadcast on the library's webcast and other media. There will be a formal question and answer period after the lecture in which the audience is encouraged to ask questions and offer comments. But please be advised that your voice and image may be recorded and later broadcast as part of this event. By participating in the question and answer period, you're consenting to the library's possible reproduction and transmission of your remarks. We ask you to also please limit your questions to those that are strictly on the topic of today's discussion. Unfortunately, this forum does not entertain questions that might be political in nature. We thank you for your understanding. And now our Ethiopian specialist, Mr. Fentahun Tirune.
Thank you, Peggy. His Excellency Ambassador Girma Birru Gada, staff of the Embassy of Ethiopia, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a distinct pleasure to welcome the Ambassador of Ethiopia and his staff here in our reading room. I am particularly thankful to His Excellency for accepting my invitation to give this important lecture on a timely topic about the growth and transformation plan of Ethiopia up to 2015. Before I introduce the ambassador, I would like to thank the staff of the Ethiopian Embassy for providing the reception, the beautiful ladies are preparing in our conference room in the back. The ambassador is also willing to take a few questions. Please make your questions and comments as brief as possible. His Excellency has graciously extended his stay with us during the reception to welcome those who would want to speak with him. Now, I will introduce the ambassador by reading a brief biography. Ambassador Girma Birru was appointed as a special envoy to the US in December 2010. Before he assumed his present post, he was the Minister of Trade and Industry of Ethiopia for 9 years, from October 2001 to October 2010. From August 1995 to October 2001, he was Ethiopia's Minister of Economic Development and Cooperation. Ambassador Girma Birru also served his country as a minister heading the Ethiopian Revenue Administration Board. He was also the Deputy Minister of Finance Administration and Logistics of the Ministry of National Defense from May 1992 to November 1994, after serving as the Chief Advisor to the Minister of Defense on economic issues for 10 months. He started his professional public service as an economist in the Office of the Council of Ministers beginning from 1982, after successfully completing his undergraduate studies with distinction. During the long span of these high-level government positions, Ambassador Girma played his due role in initiating national development programs and strategies in vast and critical areas of industry and trade. Ambassador Girma discharged his services towards ensuring a strong bond of private and public partnership and injected his part in enhancing competition by contributing towards Ethiopia's investment promotion and to the growth of the export sector. He was Ethiopia's chief negotiator at the World Trade Organization by leveraging and navigating propitious venues in the ongoing accession process to this august body. Over and above his in-country services at various levels, Ambassador Girma Birru has also served as an alternate governor of the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and as a board member of COMISA Bank, PTA Bank, representing his country from 1995 to 2001. He has also registered a resume of leadership as a chairman and member of the board of directors between 1992 and 2010 on different organizations and institutions, including the Ethiopian Electric Power Corporation, Development Bank of Ethiopia, Ethiopian Investment Agency, Ethiopian Road Authority, where he served as board chairman. He also discharged his services as an active board member of the National Central Bank of Ethiopia and the World Bank-funded Ethiopian Social Rehabilitation Development Fund. Ambassador Girma Birru has produced 2 publications entitled The Possible Effect of the Adjustment Role of Devaluation in Ethiopia and the Importance of Coffee in the Ethiopian Economy. Ambassador Girma Birru currently holds Master of Arts in Economic Policy and Planning from the Institute of Social Studies from The Hague, Netherlands, and Bachelor of Arts in Economics with distinction from the Addis Ababa University in Ethiopia. Ambassador Girma Birru Gada is known for his extraordinary intelligence with a gift of a balanced understanding of different points of view. As a young man, he has struggled to bring about the ideals of democracy and better life to the ordinary citizens of Ethiopia. Ambassador Girma is married and is the father of 2. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome Ambassador Girma Birru.
Thank you, Fantaun, for your very kind introductory remarks. It's very generous remark, so I have to thank you. I want to thank also, in addition to you, your supervisors, Dr. Mary Jane Deeb and Dr. Peggy Pilston for hosting me here to speak to such a distinguished gathering. It's my first time to this library, and I'm very impressed by what I have seen and by what you have introduced me to this morning. I want to thank also all of you in this audience for coming to listen to this lecture. The topic I have chosen for today's lecture, as you may see from the screen, is the Growth and Transformation Plan of Ethiopia. I took this topic because I was also in the center of the formulation of this program before being assigned here to the United States as an ambassador. So it's very close to my heart. And secondly, I thought this would help to show you where Ethiopia is going and with what magnitude, and to listen to your comments at the end of the lecture if there is something you would like to raise in forms of comments or questions. To go directly to the topic, my presentation would have this following outline. I would like to try to give you a background to what Ethiopia looks like and to some of the issues that has led us to the preparation of this program. And then I will try to briefly explain the main objectives of the Growth and Transformation Plan and the strategic pillars on which it has been based. And thirdly, there are two growth scenarios that are being considered for this Growth and Transformation Plan. I will try to briefly go over that. And then I would be looking into the leading sectors broadly. I will try to cover the leading sectors in focus for the program period, and then go briefly to the progress achieved, and then show you the challenges and key issues that we have been facing during the last 2 years. And maybe even at the beginning when we designed the program itself, there were issues we have identified to be a challenge all the way in the implementation period. As a background, as you all know, Ethiopia occupies a very strategic position in the Horn of Africa. And it's very strategic in the sense Ethiopia is in the middle of the Horn of Africa. And all the countries on the east and on the west, and even including Ethiopia, have gone through difficult moments. And getting Ethiopia stable and getting Ethiopia moving forward will help all the others to go forward, because demographically the role of Ethiopia is not small. And in being at center, Ethiopia could be also the center for stability and economic growth if Ethiopia is going to play a very constructive and positive role. Ethiopia is a country that has enjoyed being a diverse country for all the history Ethiopia has been known for. So Ethiopia is known for having diverse national cultures. And now Ethiopia is experiencing a decentralized federal system since 1995. For some who have not had the chance to know Ethiopia, Ethiopia has 9 federal states, and in terms of physical location, it's basically in the Horn area. Despite many challenges, Ethiopia is one of the most politically stable countries in Africa, particularly during the last 20 years. The geographic location, as I have mentioned earlier, is very critical, but we have maintained to be politically very stable to be during the last 20 years or so. Since the early 2000s, Ethiopia has strongly pursued a developmental state economic governance model. To make this very simple, it's simply a decision to see the role of the government to be constructively assisting a development in the country. In the Ethiopian development, agriculture still remains to be the most important source of growth because agriculture contributes still today about 40% of the GDP to the total development. So it remains to be the major driving force for economic growth. Before launching the Growth and Transformation Plan of Ethiopia, Ethiopia has experienced strong growth, generally which was very broad-based, and the real economic growth for about 7 consecutive years before the launching of the program was on average 11% in real terms. The GDP we have formulated has an ambitious target. It's very ambitious. And the assumption is if we succeed in putting in place this plan, this would extricate the country from poverty and place it in the club of middle, lower income countries by around 2025. When we move to the objectives of the Growth and Transformation Plan, there are 4 key objectives to this preparation of the plan. The first one is to just maintain the growth that we have been successfully achieving for the last 7 consecutive years, which was on average about 11.2% over the program period, and through this have achieved the Millennium Development Goals. This is the first target. And the second one is to expand and ensure the qualities of education and health services and achieve a Millennium Development goal that has to do with social sector development. The third goal is to sustain the nation building process that we have started through the creation of a stable, democratic, and developmental state. And the last, but which is very important, is we realize all the above objectives within a stable macroeconomic framework. If the 11% or whatever more than that would be achieved in an inflationary situation or in non-stable macroeconomic situation, the whole gains would be eroded. So all this program should be implemented within a stable macroeconomic environment. So these 4 goals would hinge on certain strategic pillars. What are these pillars? And the first pillar is to sustain the rapid and equitable economic growth that has been put in place. The economy has been growing by 11% on average, so we have to be able to sustain this. Otherwise, the program of reducing poverty by half by 2015 would not be achieved. So the first one is to sustain the existing growth. And the second one is to maintain agriculture as a major source of economic growth. We cannot neglect agriculture because agriculture still continues to employ over 80% of the population. And agriculture contributes, as I have said earlier, over 40% for the growth, for the GDP. It contributes this amount. And the major export still comes from agriculture. So if we want to sustain this fast growth, agriculture should continue to play the role. And in fact, it should play a leading role. And the other very important strategic pillar is to create conditions for the industrial sector to play a key role in the economy. At this stage, we are agrarian, and we may wish to industrialize, but we can't simply do it because we don't have the industrial base. But during the program period, we work diligently to be able to see industry playing key role in the economy so that eventually economy would start to lead the development. Ethiopia is one of the African countries that do not have sufficient infrastructure in terms of quality or in terms of the amounts of infrastructure development. So enhanced expansion and quality of infrastructure development would be the other pillar strategy. The other one is in the social development, equally education, health, and similar social development issues have to be addressed. And next, building capacity and deepening good governance is very important for us. Having right type of democracy, good governance is not a choice. It's not like some other countries who have developed earlier and who had made a choice on this issue. For us, given our diversity and our own history, good governance and building capacity would be one critical issue. And finally, promoting gender and youth empowerment and equality are very important pillar issues. After putting all this in place, we have set two important growth scenario considerations. The first one is what we have called base case scenario, and the second one is a high case scenario. Under the base case scenario, we only try to put in place the projection to maintain the existing 11.2 average growth that has been achieved during the last consecutive 7 years. We are not going to repeat any additional thing, but at least to be able to maintain and get a result we have been getting for the last consecutive 7 years. And relatively, this is the easier one. So this is a base case scenario. And the high case scenario is a very ambitious one, extremely ambitious. Under this high case scenario, we have envisaged an average growth of about 14.9%. And this is an extremely ambitious one because it would expect the economy on a higher, it would put the economy on higher trajectory, and this would call for agricultural output to be doubled by the year 2015. From a base year of 2010, by 2015, if we are going to be able to achieve 14.9% average growth, the total output of agriculture should be doubled. This is a very high task. Which leading sectors would be in focus? Of course, all sectors would have their own share, but there are some sectors to bring about such a change which would be seriously in focus. The first one would be definitely agriculture. Agriculture will continue to be the major source of economic growth, as I have mentioned earlier. When we talk of agriculture in Ethiopia, we are talking of smallholder-based agriculture, because we have close to 13 million small household-based agricultural community. And if we are going to bring about change on the life of the people, we cannot bypass this group. It's only through assisting this group that we can move forward. So when we talk of agriculture in Ethiopia, we have a plan to expand this to a larger private sector, but largely it's on smallholder-based agriculture. to be able to get this smallholder agriculture contribute the role it would be expected to contribute, productivity would be a major issue. We would not be able to get all this from increase the land that's going to be cultivated. It's largely on increasing productivity of agriculture. And agricultural output rise through productivity has already been experienced during the last 7 years. So this was the focus, output rise through increasing productivity. This increase in crop production, as our food security is largely related to crop production, is very crucial to be able to attain our food security, and also for increase in exports. So crop production would be the centerpiece of the agricultural development. Of course, fisheries, forestry, livestock are equally important, but crop production in the Ethiopian situation is a very important entry point. And with private sector, in Ethiopia, the initiative of the private sector has been declining over a period of time before this government took office for various reasons. Particularly in agriculture, there was no significant participation of the private sector. So during this program, of course, it would not be the major source of increase in the output, but private sector participation starting from marketing all the way up to production would be very much encouraged. The next sector that would be of focus is infrastructure. Ethiopia is a very much rugged, and in many areas we are very much mountainous, as you can see from this picture. And we are not connected to the major roads, and connection of villages to the major roads is very, very difficult in Ethiopia. So in the program period, meaning in this medium-term program period, we are planning to build 97,500 kilometers of new roads. This would include largely all-weather roads to connect villages to roads, to the main roads. And out of this sum, actually 72,000 kilometers would be all-weather roads that would connect small villages to the main roads. The other very important infrastructure in a country like Ethiopia is railways. And the railway we have is more or less a museum piece. We don't consider to have a railway system at this stage. So we are planning to construct this from the scratch. And it's a very ambitious plan, and it's a plan to construct close to 2,400 kilometers of new railways that would link us to the main port and growth corridors of the country. And it would connect us to two important points on the port, and then those two important lines would connect the north and northwestern of the country, and the main artery that would be coming on the lower side would be connecting to the central highlands and to the west of the country. This is the first phase. And the next phase of 5, to be able to reach 5 to 8,000 would be during the next program period. The third important infrastructure is power. Ethiopia is generating at this stage something in the range of 2,100 megawatts of hydro energy. And during the program period, we are having a program of generating additional 8,000 megawatts energy. And not only the dam construction, close to 132,000 kilometers of new connections, transmissions would be required. And this would put us at the end of the program period in terms of connection. We would be able to have access to about 75% of our population, which is now less than 50%. Telecom is the other very important infrastructure, and the plan is to raise the cell phone users from 10 to 40 million. Water supply in the urban areas and in the rural area is a very challenging infrastructure. We are planning to expand water supply infrastructure actually to 99% of the population. And to be able to achieve this, particularly in the lowland areas, drilling of some 3,000 water wells per year would be needed. Irrigation, which has been forgotten for a very long time in Ethiopia, would be one we would address: small-scale irrigation and large-scale irrigation. The plan is to increase irrigation coverage from 3% of total farmland to 16% by the end of the program period. Social infrastructure would be important for all what we would do in all other sectors. So the first priority that the government has been engaged with for a very long time is on primary education. So by the end of the program, as this end of the program is exactly matching the 2015, a year that would be required to reduce our poverty by half and meet the Millennium Development Goal. By that time, we increase our net primary enrollment, net, to 100%. And the next one is the university students population. By the time most of you who are very senior here and who have been to universities in Ethiopia, we were having student population of 3,000 or so, 2,000 population, and now we have hundreds of thousands, but by the end of the program period, we are planning to have 500,000 university student population. The other one is everybody would not go to universities to be able to survive, as you know. So we would like to raise the number of students who would be going to TVET, that's technical and vocational education, to be above 1 million. And on the health area, we have to be able to reach 100% primary health service coverage by the end of the program period and meet the Millennium Development Goals in both health and education program. What we produce and what we have is a primary product, as you know. So the plan during the program period is to be able to focus on micro, small, and medium-sized industries, which would be the most important, that would create employment, and priority would be to subsectors in this program period, and micro and small enterprises would be the major focus. Of course, besides this, there are some mega public-private and public and private strategic projects in metal and engineering, which would help the total industrial development, in chemical sectors like fertilizers, in sugar production, in textile, cement, leather, etc., that are considered very important for structural transformation. So, what progress did we achieve so far in the 2 years we have gone through? Are we in line to be able to achieve the goal we have set for ourselves, or are we far away from that? In terms of progress achieved so far, during the past 2 Ethiopian fiscal years, meaning a fiscal year that would run from 2010 to 11 and 2011 to 12. Real GDP growth of 11.6% and 8.5% have respectively been registered. The average of this is close to 10% and plus, and the share of industry in total GDP has increased from 10.8% at base year, meaning from the planning stage, to 15% in the year 2010-2011. The average double-digit growth that has been registered puts still Ethiopia in the list of fastest growing economies. And in the social sector, results indicate that Ethiopia is in a better position to achieve the Millennium Development Goals targets. This has been tested by many institutions that have been assisting us in development, including the United Nations, that in the social sector, except in very few ones where we have still challenge, we have sensed that it's possible to achieve the Millennium Development Goal targets. In absolute terms, tax revenue, which is very important for getting the results to the point we want, tax revenue has doubled in the first 2 years. And the other one is a domestic saving. This is a very big challenge. Domestic savings rate, by the time we have been starting this program, was about 5.2% domestic net saving. And in 2011-12, it has increased by a good amount, more than double, and it's now 16.5%. The investment rate increase has been very significant. It has risen from 24.7% of GDP at the base year to 34.6% in 2011-2012. The other very important sector, as I mentioned earlier, is agriculture, and particularly major crops production. Total production of major crops has reached 22.2 million tons and 23.5 million tons in the first 2 years of the program period, respectively. There has been a very clear growth, but this growth is not matching with doubling of agriculture at the time we wanted by 2015. This level of growth is not actually showing that achievement. About 1.5 million people were employed in major cities and small towns during the first 2 years. This is a sum of 2 years. It's not a single year. And the average travel time to all weather roads declined now to 2.9 hours in 2011 and 2012, from the base year, which was 3.7 hours. So for an ordinary person on average in Ethiopia to be able to be closer to a road, the closest road, he would be expected to walk 2.9 hours. So this is the achievement. And that's why we need close to 72,000 kilometers of roads. In terms of water supply, in aggregate, what we have reached now is 79.8%, and in the remaining years, we have to be able to achieve 99. So this is a very daunting task. Electricity access has increased from 41% to 48.5% because of increase from 2 sources. from hydro and largely from wind. These are the two sources that have been put in place during the last 2 years. And there has been slight improvement in terms of access, which from 41% to 48.5%. We are still very far away from the 75%. Net enrollment of primary education has improved, and it has reached 85.3% now. The good thing is the female participation has increased very much, and it has reached now 83.5%. In the HIV and AIDS prevalence rate, there has been a very clear decline from 0.28% to 0.14% in the 2 years period. So this being the case, I would like to dwell on the challenge. The challenge part is very important. The first very critical challenge is capacity. Let me simply give you some sectors so that you can see clearly the challenge we are facing in Ethiopia in terms of getting this program implemented. From infrastructure, I said that our railway system is a museum piece because it has been constructed during the First World War. Then after, we did not construct a single kilometer of railroads. So the experience of designing, the experience of managing the projects, and the experience of doing the construction itself is not there. So for a country that has such a very big ambition, this definitely would continue to be a problem and a challenge. And if you take the sugar production sector, the last time we have constructed a sugar mill in Ethiopia was in 1999. It was a single factory with a capacity of about 5,000 to 6,000 TCD, ton can per day. And now, when we are preparing ourselves to construct about 11 of them in 5 years' time, the capacity it needs in all the areas I've mentioned would be very, very challenging. And in power sector, maybe similarly, but not as challenging as the others. The metallurgy sector, and also if you look into fertilizer, we have been net buyers of fertilizer. We were not having any fertilizer plant, and we are in the process of establishing about 11 plants. So this, even if the finance would be available, it would continue to be a challenge. This has been known even when the program was designed. There is no development effort in where one would finish the capacity issue and then go to development. It's through the development effort that capacity itself is going to be created. So this is one of the challenges, and the government is focusing on addressing this challenge. The next major challenge is the low private investment response, particularly in manufacturing. The private sector in countries like Ethiopia would be afraid to go into manufacturing because manufacturing is a very competitive sector. It's a global competition. Given the low level of technology and the infrastructure problem, there is a very low response from the private sector. So special encouragement and special programs and packages need to be done, and this is a government, this is the issue on which government is focusing. The next challenge has to do with financing. I did not tell you grossly what amounts of finance this whole program needs. When we designed the program, the estimate for the whole program was close to 57 billion US dollars. This is slightly more than the GDP of the country in 1 year. So at the beginning of the program, we have not, and one actually cannot make sure in having all the resource and the finance in hand before starting the program. It's in the process that would be able to get the money. So where we have low domestic savings and where low tax revenue is collected because of culture and so many things, and in where our export earnings is much lower than our expenditure requirement, this would continue to be a challenge. We knew from the beginning that this would be a challenge, but the fact there is a challenge does not mean that one has to sit down and see. We have to continue to do what we can and see on how we can address this challenge. The fourth major challenge would be the risk of high inflation. This magnitude of investment and such a large program would require financing, and there is a risk of high inflation if it's not controlled. And in fact, we have already faced this reality during the last 2 years, in where we had a very significant amounts of inflation that had reached over 30% at some stage. The good thing is we have now controlled it to below 12%, which is a very good achievement. But still, in the remaining years, if we don't seriously look into it, there is a risk of high inflation. So the government is putting its eyes on day-to-day basis on how public resources would be flown and on how money supply would be controlled so that it would not be part of the problem. The fifth important problem is low agricultural productivity. The level of agricultural productivity has been increasing from time to time. Particularly, there are pioneer productive agricultural workers who have been teaching others to follow. But as you know, it doesn't quickly come when we are dealing with smallholder farmers. To be able to convince smallholder farmers in where even things are right for them, they are not that fast risk takers. So it takes some time. So yes, there has been improvement in agricultural productivity, but it's not coming in a way I have projected earlier to be able to double our agricultural output in the last program period. The last problem has to do with cultural elements. This would affect maybe our achievement in MDGs. This is on maternal mortality rate. In this area, we would definitely be able to reach each household in terms of educating them. And we have trained about 38,000 health officers who would reach every household. But the problem is the society would not like at some stage to go to hospital. It takes some time to convince them to expose themselves to doctors and nurses, and culturally they will try to explain to you that my mother and my grandmother has given birth at home. Why do I have to go there? It would be the question, and we are working very hard on this. As a result, maternal mortality rate has significantly started to go down, but at this stage, this would continue to be a challenge. In conclusion, I have said earlier that this GTP is ambitious, and from donor groups, from friends, we have been receiving that this is a very ambitious program, they said, and we have agreed. It's ambitious, but technically it's achievable. It is within our production possibility frontier to be able to address this target. And the ambitious program is well underway. And generally, it looks it's going at least in line with the base case scenario at this stage. It would require a big effort from our side to be able to move to the high case scenario. The first 2 years of implementation has been very good, and particularly it was very good in terms of getting experience, and achieving base case scenario target is a good result also, because we are still among the fastest growing economies in the world. Despite all this, there are serious challenges, the 6 challenges I have mentioned earlier, which would require attention in the course of implementation from the government, from the civil society, and from the private sector to be addressed. I thank you very much for listening to this boring, long lecture. And as I have promised earlier, I would leave some time for question and answer to listen to you, rather than trying to tell you again what I have told you earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I learned a great deal, and international development was always a field in which I felt we needed more information and everything. I would like to ask you a question. You talked about growth, which would be also equitable. And we have seen some countries in Latin America and Asia have this very rapid growth, which benefited a small group at the top because they were the ones with the money, the technology, and so on. How would you be able to create equitable growth? Equitable growth in the sense of not a lopsided growth, but an equitable one.
Yeah. It's a very fair question. And when one talks basically about market economy, the first challenge is not only growth, and it's an equitable growth. Because by its nature, the market system would not give everyone the gains. It may give everyone the chance. So in Ethiopia, at this stage, I assure you that this is not a main challenge, because we are at a very early stage of growth. Primarily, we are agrarian. When we are agrarian, it's a sector in where you don't see that big productivity. So the gains would be shared by the producers themselves. Because we are agrarian, it's not because we are uniquely different as government. There was a research recently to see on how this growth is equitable. And through 2 major indicators we have tested in Ethiopia that growth is very much equitable. One is when you look into the poverty index. A growth that has been brought in one country, if it doesn't end up in reducing poverty, that means it's very much skewed. There is no doubt. So luckily, in Ethiopia, the growth that we have achieved so far has reduced poverty by about 11% by the year 2004, which was about 37, 38. Now it's reduced to 27. So if it were not equitable, it wouldn't reflect itself in reducing this. And when we look into the Gini coefficient, a coefficient that has been produced 100 years back by an Italian statistician, Ethiopia's coefficient is about 0.3. The closer it is to 0, that means there is equitable distribution. The closer to 1, it's more inequitable. So 0.3 imbalance is a fair one. But there is no guarantee. The more we develop, if we don't look into it from the beginning, that it would continue this way. Particularly when we move out from having agrarian character, it would come. And your point is well taken, and this is where we are now. Thank you, sir. About university education? Yeah, we are exactly driving to be able to achieve a university population of exactly 467,000 to be exact. 500,000, that's why I said 5 million. Very pertinent questions. And quality of education. May I repeat? Shall I repeat? The first one has to do with quality of education. He appreciated the expansion of education, particularly in higher learning education. But the problem he sees is that of quality of education. And does it go with the social and economic needs of the country, is the first question. And the second one, for all those who would be graduating from this higher learning or from the TVET, is there a job opportunity, is a question. Quality of education actually is one of the major problems that we have in Ethiopia. And the government is focusing on this not only at a higher learning level, even on the high school and on elementary level, quality of education is a concern. I sometimes get the temptation myself when I look into my own kids' textbooks that I feel I had the opportunity of getting a better education than my kids. And I don't think this is right. And because quality of education has to be equated with the social and economic needs you have reached, instead of simply knowing things for their own sake. So it's very difficult to compare the quality of education we have been into 30, 40 years back with the quality of education today. If we look into it by its own merit, the quality of education in Ethiopia with the social and economic needs of today, it is still lower. So that's why we have addressed this. We have to be able to address this. And to address this, maybe providing books may not be enough. Providing right type of teachers may not be single-handedly enough. It has to be combined all together. The right type of reference books, the right type of laboratories, and also follow up at starting household level. Parents coaching itself should be included. So it should be a national movement in terms of making a focus on quality of education. So your comment is correct, and it's a subject on where we are dwelling now. In terms of job opportunity, we have already known that government would be the least job provider if Ethiopia is going to grow. If anyone is going to expect the government to be a major employer, it's a failure of policy. So encouraging the private sector primarily to be a major employer is the first priority. And secondly, self-employment. All students who would go through the higher learning system or who would have the chance to go to the TVET should be able to look into engaging themselves into having a job for their own. Self-employment is a very important thing. In our days, we would go to school, finish the school, and we would expect the government to put us somewhere. But the government, even including regional offices, may not employ totally more than 1 million. So we are following this line, and getting unemployment of 1.5 million in 2 years is very important. You know, every year, if we include the rural areas in Ethiopia, close to 1.2 million people would be eligible for work. At this stage, it's agriculture that's absorbing them. Agriculture would not continue to absorb everyone. At some stage, people would start to move out of agriculture. That's why we have to look into industrialization, into service sectors to be the major employer. And self-employment and private sector would be the major employers, I think. Thank you. On exporting teff, unfortunately, the decision has been passed not to export teff when I was the Minister of Trade and Industry. As an economist, basically, I do not personally like to stop export to be able to feed others. In terms of right market thinking, it would not help. But to be able to address the problem of increasing price of teff at that moment, it was maybe the right decision. The good thing now is we are seeing a very good increase in productivity of teff, which was about 1.1 ton per hectare of land. Now it's reaching about 4.5 to 5 tons. There is a 4 or 5-fold increase in some areas, particularly when they use modern farming practice. So if this would help us to increase our productivity, why not? We should permanently export and support our own farmers. Our own farmers would get a benefit when we export it abroad. On the railway system we have it's not something we can think of rehabilitating. It's something we have to disregard. But on that same line, we are going to have a new one with a wider gauge. And in terms of connectivity, we have a plan to connect ourselves to our neighbors. And Ethiopia is actually in the forefront in terms of doing this reconnection.
Mr. Ambassador, I remember the population of Ethiopia in 1960 was in the neighborhood of 20 million.
Yes.
Today, so 60 years later, we're approaching the 90 million. So there is a population growth which cannot be sustained in terms of, when you look at it in terms of the productivity. And is there any population control policy that is going hand in hand in terms of the economic development that's going on in the country? Why? And the other thing is, do we have a baseline? For example, when you're talking about 7 years of growth within a 10%, is there a baseline within the GNP or the per capita income that shows if there is any real progress going on in the country? Because as my colleague here indicated to you, as growth starts getting bigger, it's more complicated. And if it's complicated by the issue of population growth, it's going to be difficult. And of course, how are you going to control the inflation related to the same thing?
Yeah, the question is a very pertinent one. Ethiopia is one of the third, it's the second biggest population in Africa now. So in this increasing population, which would erode, of course, the gains in the social and economic area, what policies does the government follow in terms of control is the first one. And the second one is does the government has a baseline for per capita income and some others, so that clearly one would see on how things are developing. On population control, I personally see that in Ethiopia, I don't think we would succeed in strict plan of population control per se, because we are a very religious society, as you know. And the government, I don't think, would succeed in trying to simply tell to the public that you reduce your population and all these things. But I am personally convinced that a development of an economy that's not matching with its own people would not help. So for positive population growth, development itself is very important in my own understanding. Expanding education to rural areas. If women do have the chance of being engaged in productive economic activity, and if we try to reduce the early ages in where they start giving birth, this would be a positive control. If we expand facility from the urban centers to the rural centers, and if we keep women particularly engaged in these activities, it would be a very positive instrument in terms of controlling population. In Addis, there is no preach that we do in terms of trying to control population. But in Addis, the number of birth rates we see are as good as any developed country. So development itself is a very good instrument. In addition to this, of course, use of contraceptives and all these things on their own free will should be made available. And as a result, there has been a very good move. At the beginning, when I was in the Ministry of Economic Development and Cooperation, I was managing Population Control Office. We had, for any productive woman, the amount of births she gives was about 7.4 child per in her lifetime. Now this is reduced to 5, 6, and even below in some areas. So this type of things would help. On the positive side, if we particularly continue to grow very fast, population itself is a potential. It's not only a negative thing, unless growth in Ethiopia stagnates. On the baseline, there was 1 point. The per capita income Ethiopia had in 1992, as you remember, was about $110. And by the time the economic model we have started to put in place started, it was 170. Now it's 513. When you compare this to an average earning here, which is about 49,000 or something, you can imagine the distance we have to travel. But it is improving.
Two more questions. Dr. Bala?
Thank you, Ambassador. Congress. My question focuses on the global competitiveness of Ethiopia in terms of sustainable development and investment opportunities. As you know, this is the 50th anniversary of the Union or AU. We remember Adwa, the demand. The global world is competitive at the moment for economic success. Ethiopia has a special place in Africa. Here it is. What is Ethiopia's competitive advantage in terms of attracting investors, both public and private, to reach some of the goals that you addressed? Are there anything that the Library of Congress can do?
In what the Library of Congress would do, I hope they are all here, they know. But in terms of attracting investors in Ethiopia, what would be the competitive edge of Ethiopia? First, stability. This is very important. If you don't continue to be stable, no one would be prepared to look into that country. And this, you may not be able to attach any index to it, but this is first important thing. In terms of factors, Ethiopia's competitiveness next starts from labor. Ethiopia has a very disciplined labor. This I can speak. Here, as an ambassador, when I go from place to place, from one hotel to the other, the general managers would tell me one thing continuously. They tell me, look at your workers. They are very disciplined and honest. This is a value that we have carried from home. And this would be an attractive instrument for investors. So because it's labor, the source of competitiveness. Secondly, energy. You may not know, in Ethiopia, we sell energy, the amount we have been producing. For a kilowatt hour, what consumer or an industrialist would pay in Ethiopia to your supplies is less than 4 US cents per kilowatt hour, in where you pay here 9 cents and above. So for a manufacturer who would be moving to Ethiopia, he would get his product produced by an energy use of less than half cost. And land is also available. It's not very cheap, but compared to the region, the price you get for this is also reasonable. And the good relationship with our neighbors, who would be our gates, like Djibouti, we have a very good relationship, so sustainable export-import life would continue. And that's why we have been able to get flour producers in less than 10 years to be the second major producer of export of flours from Ethiopia. So there is a chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for this talk. It strikes me, and I'm sure many of us here, that we are lucky. Can you hear me? We're lucky because we get to hear this presentation and also hear your explanations. And it seems that one of the challenges of this
Thank you, Professor. Professor Lara is actually someone who can teach me because she knows Ethiopia much more than I do. She has been working on research on Ethiopian issue. So on what we do, let me simply take the health experts we have trained. When we started this program, we decided, starting from the number of villages we had, to train about 38,000 health extension workers who would go house to house, teach our rural farmers' households on how to use latrine and on how to wash their hands after that, and on how to wash their own body in time and all these things. And the choice was not sudden. Women were the right choice for this. Largely women were the right choice because they know how to communicate this more than I do. At least I don't know about the other men, but I know from experience women would do much better in terms of communicating this type of complex things to a person who has never been exposed to this type of experience. So the role of women in that was very, very important. And also in some other activities, particularly in the rural areas, women were the source of encouraging people to go to school in terms of sending small kids. Instead of telling largely to the father, it's better to tell to the woman. So it's through this the government was trying to address these sorts of issues. I don't know if I correctly got your question from distance.
Okay. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And there's one more thing. Just
Okay.
Ambassador, on behalf of the African Middle East Division, we want to thank you for having given us such a wonderful and enlightening presentation. And we only have a little token so that you don't forget us completely. And it is from the Library of Congress and from our divisions. This is our books that say something about our collections. And you will find items of the Ethiopian collection among them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.